Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. I know it's time is critical, so it's always good to have you guys here. We being Adam, Maria, and I, we're part of the 360 team. We're always very interested in figuring out how to best use 360 at your campus, at your district, at your specific school, whatever capacity you're serving at. The whole idea of these webinars really is just to kind of highlight some of the things that people have done using certain functionality in Review360. The highlights today are going to be, how to use courses, how to use the universal screener, and then how to report incidents. What Adam, Maria, and I are going to do is obviously share, this very briefly, this is how, but more importantly, kind of expand on what other districts have done to use certain functionality. I know whether you're a first-time user, whether you've been using it for a year or even longer than that, sometimes we hear things on these calls that people didn't realize they could do. So that's really what we're going to focus on. Obviously, we're going to leave plenty of time at the end for your questions, especially if you're trying to use Review360 and you just really want to know how to enhance it or how to implement it better in the school or so on. So feel free to ask those as well. We'll have people monitoring those chats. But what we're going to do first is really what you're looking at, just a reminder, is the dashboard. And where we're going to go focus is really the courses. And really what a lot of schools are doing is really looking at whether we want to really open this course library. I'm going to go ahead and click in it. I'm going to click My Courses. Do we want to open this library to have everyone have access to all this professional development? In doing so, sometimes you can get a lot out of having this open library. Sometimes schools have said they've had better luck by closing the library and just basically having administrators assign courses, which I'll show you and remind you how to do that. But what I wanted to focus on is we really wanted to make sure to recognize any of the new kinds of courses that we've had. If you've been around with 360 for more than 2 or 3 years, we want to make sure we're kind of emphasizing this tier structure that we're presenting. Multi-tier systems of support, RTI for behavior, trying to get those tier levels of strategies into those hands of teachers that are dealing with lots of intense tier levels of need. These courses can do that. And how they're structured is that if you're going to present, and what a lot of schools that have been effective has said, look, we're going to present this to our staff, and we're going to make sure that all the people on the campus go through this classroom management. And just a reminder that these classroom management courses really align with that positive behavior interventions and support, all those tenets that make this more proactive, more positive, especially when we're dealing with behavior. So, having teachers go through this takes about 45 minutes. And just a reminder, we have 2 different versions, elementary and secondary. And again, what new teachers get from this is a quick foundation of how to set up a classroom that's more positive and preventative and proactive. What veteran teachers get is a reminder of the importance of setting high expectations, creating procedures, structuring for success. Are we acknowledging kids? Do we have a positive working relationship with our kids? And of course, do we have a hierarchy of consequences that we're using? And so this really does promote that. And so again, I think a lot of districts that have had success have said, we're going to start with classroom management, lay the tier 1 foundation, okay? And then what they go to is they move into what we call the tier 2, and that's the behaviors of concern. And these are, again, tier 2 strategies specific to that behavior. Having an open library, what some of my districts have said is, having it there doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be used. So what happens is some of my schools are saying, based on the incident data, we realize we've got an anger and aggression problem on campus. In our community, we're seeing much more of the anger and aggression. So what the administrators will do is they'll say, tell teachers, I really want you guys to go in and access that anger and aggression module in those behaviors of concern to try to identify some of those tier 2 strategies. So that can be really helpful. Again, having your incident data, which we'll talk about here in a minute, drive some of the things that you can push on that tier 2 levels of data. But again, structuring the classroom management is tier 1, and then structuring the behaviors of concern is tier 2 can be a big advantage when you're trying to implement the courses on campus, especially when you're being strategic. We know from the data that a lot of times when you throw everything at someone, they don't do any of it. But if we can be strategic about throwing 1 or 2 things, teachers tend to implement that a little bit better. Okay? And then, go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say, in that level, what I have found with a lot of my districts is they're looking at it from a school level or maybe even a feeder pattern level or what have you, but they are taking that and then they're building some of their staff time around it. Instead of having people go out on their own, they're actually having staff meetings and discussing it and collaborating on it together. So they're bringing it into their staff meetings, and so they're identifying it and talking about it together collectively. So I see that's been used there as well.
Yeah, that is. That's a good strategy as well. Registering for, again, as you move to the Tier 3, we have several courses for Tier 3. We have what we call our behavioral module, our module for students with autism. Again, these are for chronic and severe behavior to really kind of open and empower teachers. Again, being able to look at the specific track about elementary or secondary is really looking at, again, chronic and severe. So what we're dealing with here, this Tier 1, is, again, trying to redirect, trying to be proactive and prevent the behavior. The behaviors of concern, Tier 2, we're trying to minimize the impact that behavior has. But when it gets to that Tier 3, again, what we're trying to do is, again, reduce the intensity and the severity of this behavior to obviously increase the instructional environment. So the courses can be a great way to layer out that Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And then, again, we have a bullying piece, and then our brand new piece is our social emotional learning. So, again, if you're on the call and you do not have access to that social emotional learning, just, email your implementation specialist, inquire about how to access that social emotional learning. We can add that to your account. But, again, we know social emotional learning is a big shift now. Even though we've been dealing with, social skills and those kinds of things, it's really important to get everybody on the same page. And the last thing we'll talk about in the courses is, again, what principals have been saying to us is that in order to increase the use of these courses, they're using the assigned course feature. And what principals do, whether you're an interventionist, it just means you have an administrator type of user. You can actually go in here and click assign courses, and then, of course, just click this assign course to the left, and then pick the particular course that you want to promote. Again, depending on what your data is telling you, should really drive those particular kinds of courses. If you want everyone to have certain things, if you've got a bullying issue or you want to prevent some of that bullying, I might say I'm going to have everybody do bullying, and then I can actually decide if I want to do a group of people or if I want to do specific people. So, again, administrators have really liked this feature when utilizing it to, again, not to say, hey, teacher, you're doing poorly, but to say, hey, I think this would be really good information for you guys to have in order to really kind of identify those strategies that might be really helpful. Okay? Adam and Maria, anything else on courses?
Not for me. I think you did great explanation.
Okay. All right. I did think of one last thing is that one thing that I think a lot of administrators do not do is they do not go into the analysis and look at courses. And let me tell you why this could be an advantage. So this will be the last thing, and then we'll go to the next one. On the analysis, if I go in and do a course summary, and you're an administrator, and you pull up, here's a list of modules that my teachers are going into. And it seems like of all the modules, most of them are going into behaviors of concern. So that tells me maybe there's some tier 2 issues that we need to address. So what some of my administrators are doing is looking at their course survey results, and then what they're saying is they're only bringing in professional development and staff development based on what teachers are actually going in and clicking. So again, it can be valuable to really kind of create this strategy when you're bringing in professional development. I know a lot of teachers, I know when I taught, a lot of times the professional development did not really align with what my needs were. So the courses can actually help you guys identify what teachers maybe are struggling with. Okay? So that's courses. Again, just we can talk about if you have courses kind of questions, we can answer those when we're done. But we're going to go into the universal screener. I'm going to go ahead and toggle to a teacher. And really what we're looking at here is, again, Review360 promotes 2 screeners. And the 2 screeners that we promote are what we call the BASC Best 3 and then what we call the SSIS SEL. Both screeners have positives, more positive than others. We're going to talk about those and how other districts are using those particular universal screeners and so on. I'm actually going to show you how easy it is to complete. They're very easy to actually set up. In fact, you know what, I just want to show you real fast. That way I'll be able to chance to talk to it. I'll just show you how easy it is to set up. Administrators go in, click Universal Screener, and then they're going to go down to the bottom and hit Add Screener. That's all you have to do. And those are the 2 that you get to choose from. So what I want to do is I want to talk about each one and have Adam and Maria, and we'll just add again what people are doing. So let's talk a little bit about the BASC Best 3. And one thing is that the BASC Best 3 does that the SSIS doesn't is that we can do universal screening for teachers, parents, and students very quickly. So you guys have the opportunity to bring in any of the grades that you want to as a teacher, any of the grades as parents, and so on, and then students. What a lot of my districts do is they'll definitely do student screeners for those older kids, those 6 through 12. Again, same thing about parents. A lot of times they'll do, and I would say most of my districts, I don't know about you, Adam, you, Maria, but most of my districts will really do the teacher screeners and the student screeners. And that's just really, I think they've gotten a lot more data from those 2 particular ones as well. The other thing is that we have seen, and Adam kind of shared this with me as well, is that a lot of students are using their smartphones to actually complete the screeners. So sometimes schools will say, Doug, I don't know if we have all these laptops and iPads. And so what some of our schools have been doing is actually, making sure first that kids have the smartphones, but actually looking, using the smartphone to actually complete these screeners. So some of my high schools, they can do 2,500 screeners within about 20 minutes by having all the kids, at a certain time, go to the link, type in their school number, and then actually answer the question. So a very easy process to capture that data. The teachers actually have to log into Review360 to actually complete the screener. But parents and students do not have to log in. They just require a link. So again, you guys have lots of latitude about who you want to screen and so on and so forth. But again, districts do different ways. And then we're going to have the teacher fill it out. And then, of course, you can monitor it. So a lot of my districts that have been using the screeners kind of forget about this process. There is a way to actually monitor what those screeners look like. It can be really advantageous for everyone to be able to say who's completed and who isn't. Now, implementation, I think most of the districts that have had a really good turnout will use a 2-week window. What I've heard from a lot of my districts is that 3 weeks is too long. 1 week creates a little anxiety. So 2 weeks seems to be the appropriate window. So again, we're just asking teachers and staff to complete that within that 2-week period. It gives them enough time to do that and so on. I'll also show you how we can actually send reminder emails. It's a great feature for the screener. And then that's it. And then once you do that, you call it what you want, and then you've got a screener that's ready to go. So let me toggle back to the teacher and look at how we would do this. So the teacher would come in, simply log into 360. They would simply just click the details button. They would select their students. So here's the best 3. I'm going to select my students. They're my 2 that I want to. Now, obviously, in the real site, you would have probably 20, 25 kids that you're screening. So the teacher would just simply say, who do I need to screen, and so on. So again, what we've also found is some of our schools do not import their rosters into 360. And so what we're finding is if you're going to use a universal screener is to make sure that we're doing rostering. That seems to really help the implementation when it comes to screeners. So it's just one of those things that if you're on the call and you guys are not bringing in rosters, something to think about if you want to do the universal screener. So the teacher would just simply click next. Yep,
hey,
those
Jack.
are the ones I want to screen. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Seth, it's Maria. Could you go back to the select your students? So one thing that I've seen a lot is that when even in the districts where we are importing rosters, sometimes registrations are off by a day or two because as the student registers in a school, and the data kind of flows into Review360 by the time the student is officially registered. So he may be in the classroom but just not coming through quite yet.
Right.
And usually there might be like one night's delay. So in those scenarios, it's very easy to, if you know the student's ID number, you can type it in there. And if you've got 1 or 2, that makes sense to use that feature there and, search for your students that way, or by name, by last name. So I think, if you're adding 1 or 2, this is very helpful. Of course, you don't want to do this. If you've got 100 students you need to add, we need to let the import do that. But I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's good. That's good. I forgot about that. We can modify, and especially if you don't know someone too. Like Maria's saying, sometimes we need to add students because we really need to screen them, but sometimes maybe we don't know them very well, so we don't feel comfortable about screening them. It's very easy to uncheck their name and so on. So thanks, Maria. Okay. So, and once we do that, we go to the complete forms, and the teacher comes in, and basically for the best 3, you're answering all questions. These are 20 for each student. So I'm going to go through Christopher Brown, and I'm basically going to, again, I'm based on the rubric, based on what I think, how often this happens and so on. Teacher just moves through that. And again, implementation-wise, it takes about 2 minutes, no more than 2 minutes to actually complete the screeners for these kids. So when you're implementing the screener, just know that, allowing teachers some time to actually complete these will really increase, kind of the effectiveness of how they look at it. Because what we found is they feel pressured for time. Obviously, they don't spend as much thought on what those numbers really mean. So again, schools that have actually, cut out some time and just kind of use that. If you've got how many students, no more than 2. I think most of the time it's going to take 1 minute or so to fill these out. But again, teachers would just simply go through those questions and click submit. And then again, once that's submitted, I want to talk about the BASBAS 3 because of the data, is that looking at what its advantages of using this particular screener over the SSIS SEL. And what we're going to look at there is that the BASBAS 3, when we're looking at data, so here's the data, we're looking at really, what we call behavior emotional risk index, external risk index, internal and adaptive, is this idea that what do we do with the data? There's lots of different ways when we look at external versus internal. These are things that are manifested externally. These kids that are scoring high in this range are typically the ones that are sent to the office frequently. So you can actually validate your office referral kids with this screener. What we also, with a lot of surprises that we see is the IRI, the internal. These are the kids that are walking around with lots of anxiety and depression. Again, being able to highlight those. But the biggest thing about the BASBAS 3 that has really increased implementation and really made those connections is when you're able to do this, so you guys would be able to click someone like Donald Davis, who is scoring elevated in the risk, and you can actually go in, and what we have done is we have actually aligned the screener responses to Review360's replacement behaviors. So we actually give you guys a guide that these are the two categories that Donald is struggling with based on his screener responses. Again, I would narrow down to what I think is going to be the most impactful, and that's what the team would do. And let's say we all decide that it's arguing with adults. Then what we do is we actually give you evidence-based strategies that align with those replacement behaviors. So again, the Best 3, the advantage of using that is really being able to streamline those particular screener questions into a progress monitoring plan. Now, the SSIS SEL doesn't do that because it has its own creative way to deal with and support. But the Best 3, if you're looking to really identify kids and then really create a progress monitoring plan so we can monitor it, the Best 3 can be really advantageous for the schools, especially ones that have disconnect. Sometimes people on the campus are writing behavior plans kind of outside of everyone. This really helps kind of align what those plans can do, especially when 360 offers those evidence-based strategies and so on. And again, you would just work through that, and then you would end up with this plan over here, like Christopher Brown. Then we could actually do the progress monitoring plan, which we're not going to talk about today. We'll talk about it at another session. Okay? So that's the Best 3. Let me talk about the SSIS quickly, and then we'll talk a little bit about the differences. Adam has I think, a really good insight about the differences, but I want to talk a little bit about what those screeners would look like in the SSIS. So the difference here is when I go in and add a screener, I'm going to add the SSIS, and this one's a little bit easier because we only have one universal, and that's going to be for teachers to actually complete the questions. We don't have a universal way for students, even though you can, but you can do it on an individual basis. The SSIS SEL in 360 really just offers a teacher universally. So the teacher would come in, say we're going to do select all, the administrator, and then what we have are what we call 8 competencies which are promoted by CASEL. The first 5 are the social emotional, the 3 last ones are academic. You guys don't have to do that, obviously, but if you're a school district and you want to make connections between social emotional and academics, the districts that have done this have started to make connections between the two, so we kind of recommend that. Again, that's what we're just going to call it. Teachers are going to fill it out. We're going to do our 2-week window because that seems to be the best, what we've heard from our districts, and then again what we call it and so on. And then we go back to our teacher. Same thing on the Best 3. It kind of works the same way. Teachers would come into this details button. They would just simply click it. And remember, they're not going to see this screener pending unless an administrator has gone in and actually set up the screener. So I'm going to click details, and then they're going to do select students again. Again, do I take anybody off? Do I add anybody there? You know, whatever it is. Let me go ahead and make sure. And then they're going to actually go in and hit complete forms. And these are a little bit different. So in the SSIS SEL, the big difference is that you're going to actually answer questions on each of the students instead of answering all the questions on one student. So the SSIS, you would simply see on this, you're only looking at 2, but on the live site, you would actually see 20 kids scroll down here, and the teacher is going to answer the self-awareness kinds of rubrics based on all the kids. So for Carlos, I think he's a 4. For Christopher Brown, he's a 2. And again, you've got a rubric to the right to help you identify what that is. What about self-management? Carlos a 3, Christopher Brown a 4. Social awareness, a 4 and a 2. Relationship. And then we get into the, after the first 5, we get into the academics where we're going to talk about the motivation. And then we get into the reading and then math. And then again, once teachers do that, they quickly hit submit. And then what we do, again, the power of the data is really looking at what the SSIS SEL does. And our suggestion is this: if you're promoting social emotional learning and you do not have a curriculum, it is highly advisable to adopt the SSIS SEL, because when you start to look at this data, let me go ahead and pull up a report. What some of our schools are doing, again, is they're trying to be more strategic with their social skills training. I remember doing social skills 20 years ago. What a lot of schools did was their implementation was poor because they were generalizing social skills. And the problem with that is that when teachers don't see the relevance and students don't see the relevance, you tend not to implement it very well. So in order to increase that implementation, what we're trying to do is be more strategic about what we actually teach in that curriculum. So if you're looking at this particular district, and this district says we're actually scoring really low, a level 2 on self-awareness, that means we're going to take the curriculum and focus on self-awareness skills. Not necessarily negating all the rest, but we're going to focus on what that looks like and so on. And again, being able to pull up a scorecard for the SSIS SEL and be able to identify those intense needs, then, and this is where the SSIS SEL is different than the BASC, is because this comes with this full curriculum. And that curriculum, again, schools that are saying, Doug, we've got this massive comprehensive plan, and how do we use it? Well, use your data from the screener, take your curriculum guide, and then ask teachers, again, we're going to focus on different skill levels. Well, how do I know what skill levels to focus on? Do I focus on Unit 8 or Lesson 2? Well, that's going to be driven by your data that you look at. So now, not only are you going to be able to do social skills and implement it well, you're going to start to see movement in your kids, especially when you apply another screener in the spring, which a lot of our districts do, to kind of see that movement. And again, being able to see kids go from the at-risk level red to yellow and know that you did this because you were strategically targeting, relationships or self-awareness. And then, of course, you have all the resources that you need to actually implement those through the SSIS, SEL, and so on. And the same thing with the BASC 3. You still have opportunities to look at individual kids to see where they're at, especially how it breaks down into social emotional competencies. But this is more, the BASC 3 and the SEL are going to be more than enough for you guys to populate your RTI models and to be able to identify the interventions that you need. So, Adam, when someone says BASC 3 and SEL, what do you tell them?
Yeah, so kind of what I've been working with districts is, if you're looking at the BASC, you're looking at more of possibly a psychological in their thought processes that way. So, do I have depression or anxiety? Do I have a hard time sitting still? Do I have a hard time, focusing on what I'm supposed to be doing? I'm not having these emotional outbursts. Okay, so you're looking at it from that context. Not that you couldn't, move that into and look at it through a bigger lens on the social part. You could do that as well, because we have districts that do that all the time, especially with their progress monitoring and adapting their social skills curriculums that they have currently in their district. If you're looking at it from the SSIS SEL side, you're looking at it more of in social context. Where do I live in the world? How does the world react to me? How do I react to them? Do I have motivation? And how do I make decisions? Things like that. And then it has that curriculum tied directly to it. So in working with both districts, it's kind of one, I think, is what Doug said earlier. Do you already have a curriculum? And if you do, the best might be the best way to go for you. And then you use the results and push it against that curriculum on an individual basis. Because I agree with Doug. I did social skills for 20 years. They just hand it to you, and I used to tell them, I have 14 kids. I have a section on anger management, and it's 6 weeks long. Well, only half my kids have those issues. Well, now I have to teach anger management to all 14 because that's what I'm supposed to be doing in my curriculum, and I'm actually making kids who weren't angry. And so this is able to identify and prioritize specifically for the student what they need and the SSIS does the same thing. So looking at it from, psychologically, how are kids thinking about how they are within any confines, whether it's a school system or at home or what have you, compared to how they're socially, how am I adapting to it, and how it's adapting to me. So that's kind of how I explain those two different screeners.
Yeah, I like that. And I think, too, is just, again, it should all be driven by need. And so I think that's what we also help. I know Adam, Maria, and Sydney and I, we try to do that. We get those questions a lot about, which one do we use? How often do we use it? I think for a lot of my schools, using it in the fall and the spring, so 2 times a year, has been adequate. Some of my districts will do fall, winter, and at the end of the year. That could really tell you a lot as well. But I think not very many will do it more than 3 times, which means that the investment in those screeners, just the time it takes, the payoff is so much more for, again, being able to capture a moment in time. I know with benchmarking academics, sometimes we're doing that every 4 or 5 weeks. Well, this is the same thing, but we only really need to do it about 3 times a year. And again, being able to look at that data over a course of time should tell you guys, hey, these programs and strategies that we have invested time in are paying off. I mean, I was talking to a school the other day about restorative circles, and I said, well, are you guys using restorative circles? Are teachers circling up? Are they identifying, the victim and the perpetrator are they doing that? And she's like, no, we're not. And I said, well, it's going to be hard to decide efficacy if we're not tracking how often we're actually using these particular things. So again, having 360 be able to do that to support your implementation is really going to be helpful. Maria, Adam, before we move from screener to incident management, are there any other implementation things for the screener? Just like good to know things.
For me, using the SSIS SEL, when Doug was showing that, you'll see that you have a Likert type grid scale on the side with multiple levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but within the levels are multiple data points. And what I'm getting from districts is I look at the question, it's about social awareness, and in 3 of the bullet points there are 4, and in the other 3 bullets there are 3. What do I pick?
Gotcha.
We have talked about is you deferred that to a district level decision. Not all districts want people to be doing, computation and math skills right in the middle to try to find an average. Some defer and say they go to the one that has the most bullet points in it. So if they had 2 in the 4 and 3 in the 3, they would go with 3. Or others go with whatever the lowest one is because they don't want to give, a false positive of what a kid can do and set that kid up for failure. So it's kind of handled on a case-by-case individual, but that is where some of the hang-up is that they're not sure how to pick which one they want to pick. And that's kind of where I've said it on discussions, but that's kind of a district-level discussion, how you want to approach that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay. So let's move to the last thing is really incident management and talk a little bit about how districts are using this. So for 360, the actual process is to go to that student tab and click report an incident. And what we're looking at here is the openness of 360 as far as capturing the types of incidents that you have on campus is really probably one of the best things about it because, we get a lot from our districts and schools. Hey, Doug, we've got different language. We have different behaviors. We have different consequences. We have different responses. I said, well, you know what? We can take all of that and we can actually make it your own by doing our own configuration and matching what you guys are doing. So what I want to focus on is really what districts are doing for these 2 popular incident types. So we have an in-class and we have a discipline. What a lot of my districts are doing, the ones that have been using this for a while, on the in-class incident, I'm just going to go ahead and click in it. The top part, obviously we want to be able to capture times of day because we want to know, again, when. We also want to know where. So, again, remembering if you're on the call, we can change these locations. We can add, not change it, but we can add locations maybe there's a bus or there's some kind of recess or something specific, we can add to it. Again, we're just clicking the student. But the important part is this, not necessarily the types of behavior, but this right here. So what we have found with districts that have been using InClass Incidents in Review360 is to be able to say, Doug, we're tracking the positive, preventative, the interactive strategies so that we can determine the efficacy of these particular strategies. So what they're saying is, let's use that language that we're promoting at the district and put that in Review360. So what we did here is we just basically gave examples of some of my districts say, Doug, we're doing capturing kids' hearts. So let's use capturing kids' hearts language so we might write in there is teacher is at the door. And we might say is that I'm having problems with my kids coming into to start the day or start the class. And then one of the things that I'm saying is, yes, I'm standing at the door. To emphasize those strategies for those in-class incidents. So this has been really advantageous to have this kind of language in the staff responses and to be able to collect the data so that administrators, when they're getting these office referrals, remember, these are in-class incidents. When they get the office referrals, their first question is, what have you done? Well, this is what I have done. I have tried restorative circles. I tried to have conferencing with this child. I tried to set limits. I tried to conference with him and his parent. I tried to be at the door. I tried, whatever you're capturing, it's important that we look at this data over time. And I think that's the big advantage of being able to capture those in-class incidents, okay? Because what we want to do, again, is that when we go to the office referral, I'll click that one, is to be able, again, same thing, the wheres and the whys, the location. Anybody involved, we can capture that. And then again, this particular behavior list changes because of this list. But the advantage of using the office referral in Review360 is going to be that when we do this, that we're able, when we go through these particular boxes and we're having the teacher capture the incident, and again, we're just showing you examples of things that we can configure, is that this allows the teacher, as moment they hit save, an automatic email is sent to the principal. So principals that are really, really tech savvy are really, being able to say, I can go into 360 and look at the data. I can have that office referral sent to me by phone, or I can actually have the reporting sent to me through email. So the important thing is that what we're tracking through the student data, again, isn't necessarily, what we're trying to represent. What we're trying to represent is that as this data starts to come in, whether, again, through the phone, through a tablet, through email, is that we're actually being able to look at it and analyze what's going on. Because districts that are looking at in-class incidents, the ones that are becoming chronic and severe, those lead in to the office referral. In fact, 360 actually has escalation rules that we can actually say that after a teacher writes out 3 in-class incidents, that's going to be elevated to an office referral. Again, that's a great way to teach and train the teachers about how chronic and severe we need to manage before it becomes an office referral. So again, 360 can really kind of help kind of tailor how you look at your behavioral structure. But I think for what we say is in-class incident, staff responses, office referral, looking at consequences, being able to get this to the administrator, because as soon as the administrator actually goes in and fills out the consequence, the teacher's going to get an email that says what that consequence was. So we're bridging the communication when we talk about office referrals. We're bridging the communication when we talk about in-class incidents, especially when administrators can pull that data, because they're going to be able to pull all that in-class incident data when teachers start to send and so on. So they can look specifically at these in-class, especially if Julia is getting frequent times of office referrals or instant class managements, I can go specifically and look at Julia's past history and so on. So again, what we'll end with is two things. I want to talk about the analysis and then the reporting, and then I want to talk about how all of that fits together, and then we'll open for questions. But again, the biggest thing I think for when we look at, let me go ahead and go into the administrator and look at the analysis. Because as teachers start to input all this data, what I hear a lot from teachers is, what do we do with it? And what's interesting is I love this question. I love when administrators ask, what are the top 2 behaviors at this school? And what were the 2 most effective strategies at this school? So the interesting part is that a lot of teachers can tell you what the academic data is, but a lot of them struggle sometimes with the behavioral data. So what we want to be able to do is change that. So we want to be able to say, you know what, we're going to look at incident data, and we're going to make sure that everyone on campus understands, because we're looking at this on a regular basis, that if you look at the incidents, of all the incidents, abusive language is number 1. So if we all know that across the common areas in the classroom that abusive language is something that we really struggle with, then we're going to attack that as a whole with all staff members. So if I know that that's what we're targeting, then I know that when I'm walking down the hall, I know that I've got to listen a little more intently about the language that's being used at the school. And I got to do reminders. I got to be redirecting. I've got to praise when they actually use appropriate language. So by collecting that data, we've got to turn all that data into strategic interventions. And it's only going to come from when we were able to identify and, again, disaggregate all that incident data into determining, do we have a problem? Do we have a problem with a disproportionality in gender? Are we referring more girls than boys, or more boys than girls, or whatever it is? Obviously there's a norm to it, but we really want to make sure, again, as we start to see this data come in, are we doing that? And what we have found is every single school that focuses on the data tends to see a uptick in their positive behavior. Why? Because they're looking at it, because they're problem solving it. A lot of schools that are toxic, that are in trouble, they just don't look at the data. They don't know where the problems are. And one of the things that can be really helpful is, again, for administrators, especially if you're on the call, is to make sure that you're setting up those email schedules for the data. So I want to see this behavioral data, but I want to see it every week. And so administrators that have been using this, they'll get an email every Friday. Hey, this is the behavioral data. And it will quickly tell you, this is an issue that I'm looking at, and it needs to be on my radar. So this is a great way to keep those pieces of data on the radar so that when I go into a staff meeting, I'm always up to speed on where we're at. And you can do this as a teacher. I want to be up to speed on what the story is today. And so being able to schedule those emails can really provide a powerful picture. And if you don't want to do the email, just have them sent to your dashboard. Again, I can have this sent. This is in real time. So as the data starts to come in, this will update in real time, so you guys don't have to constantly update a new report. So again, these are the implementation things that a lot of our administrators are using to say, we're taking the time to collect the data, so let's take the time to analyze it so that we can take the time to problem solve and turn those into interventions. Okay? Adam and Maria, comments on incidents before we pull it all together?
Yes. So if you go to the analysis and incidents page, you have a really powerful way to find information here in case something is wrong with, you're not seeing emails come through. A lot of times we'll get messages about that. I'm not getting my incident emails. And a lot of times that can be related to either something going on within, if our email address is not allowed for some reason, or something blocked us for some reason within the district. So if you go to the analysis tab, Doug, right above at the top of this page and go to pending tasks. On this page, you're able to filter and find things fairly quickly. So whether you're a teacher or administrator, you're going to see the incidents that pertain to your particular view. So most teachers will have here a list of things that are for their students, the ones that incidents that they reported, or if you have the permission to see incidents that any teacher reported. As long as the student is on your roster, you'll see that here. And you're able to quickly see what's going on with your incidents. You can see if they're still pending, if the administrator has assigned a consequence or not. So when you're looking for something, this is a good way to quickly filter, use these filters to find things. The other thing I think probably most everyone knows is if you do have an incident number, you can enter that at the, well, first of all, in the search button here, Doug, you can type the student's name. So go ahead and type Anderson as one of our students, and then you'll start to see only incidents for Mark. You can also, if you have an email or if you took note of an incident number, you can search for that incident number over on the dashboard. If you don't have that quick widget, if you go to the dashboard to find your incident much faster, you can add that to your widget. And I would search to your dashboard, and you'll be able to quickly find your incidents as long as you have that number. That's just another way to do it. So I wanted to mention that those two features that I think are
that's good.
very helpful.
It is. And I think, again, if we're trying to increase that implementation, it's trying to remember these little tricks, these little ways that you actually can make your already job that's enormously difficult a lot easier. Is again to make the system work for you. That really does increase the implementation, and again, it's going to have an effect on student outcomes. That's what we've seen when people use, and it's not just 360. Any kind of positive software. Or any kind of strategies, the implementation, obviously they were built for that, and so on. But we'll end with this, and then we'll ask questions. Is again, what we wanted to say is that we want to align, using courses, setting people up, giving people information based on, again, the two things are being able to use a universal screener to gather what those kids look like, as well as in tandem with reporting an incident as the school year starts to evolve, to see is what kinds of in-class incidents are we seeing, what kinds of office referrals, and that all ties in together. Your incident data, your universal screener, and the strategies through courses, that's all a cycle. And it's understanding that if we want to implement a behavioral structure to its full capacity, we're going to have to use something. And what we recommend is using Review360, these features, to really kind of increase that implementation. So I hope that's been helpful. So let's go to questions. I can't see the chat room. Sherry, can you see any chats going on?
Yes, there are quite a few.
Okay.
Okay. If there's a student that transfers in the middle of the school year, do you recommend that you wait until you have them for 6 weeks before screening, or just wait until the next screening window?
I would. I'll let Adam and Maria, but yeah, I think if they're getting there, go wait your 6 weeks and screen them ASAP. Because the quicker we can get a baseline, and it doesn't matter even if it's only a month off or 2 months off, get everyone screened. Adam and Maria, do you have a different answer?
Yeah, I'm thinking that, the student comes in and say they come in November and they're not screening again until April. So if it's just one student, then it may be difficult just to open up screening just to get that one student in there. if that's what the question is from the attendee. But that's going to be tough. It depends on when you do it, and that's why when Doug was doing it, 2 times a year, but a lot of my districts are moving to 3 times because they want to capture one in the beginning, one in the middle, because in the middle maybe they change gears what they're doing because of what they're seeing, or they keep doing what they're seeing, and so instead of having to wait, well, they don't screen till April, and then we can't really implement anything until the next year anyway. So I think with that one, you probably have to wait for the next window, but if you have 3 throughout the year, it may be a little bit easier to capture that student. That's kind of how I read that one.
Yep. And I will say this is people that have implemented the screener, what some have done is said, look, we're going to do the screener September 30th, and then we had some issues with these 3 kids. We had some issues with those 2. We had some new ones come in. So what they'll do is they'll do a follow-up screener, and they'll do a kind of a makeup screener 2 weeks after the original to try to capture some of those kids that maybe they've lost. But again, they're not a part of the big group, but at least you've got some scores. So yeah, that's a great question, but I think you got a couple of different ways that you can address it. Sherry?
Is there some list that can give the acronyms for the BERI, ERI, IRI, and ARI and what they mean?
Yeah, so when you look at here is when you're in 360 and you're an administrator and you go to the Universal Screener Administration, if you scroll down here, you're going to see a manual. And those manuals explain all of those types of acronyms that you have in the system. It's both for the BASC 3 and the SSIS. So that's where you're going to find those kinds of acronyms. So that's what I would recommend. Go to that manual. Or if you're, you can quickly ask your implementation specialist as well. We know those as well. The BERI is Behavior Emotional Risk Index. ERI is External Risk Index. IRI is Internal Risk Index. And then the A, I think, is the Adaptive Risk Index for the ADR. And there's others, but the manual is probably your best bet.
Okay. If multiple teachers rate a student, does the SIS-SEL average the ratings for that student, or do they show you multiple scores?
Multiple. Yeah, we're not able to aggregate those scores, which you wouldn't want to. It would kind of compromise the integrity of the screener if we did an average. We want to be able to see it, but it's also a good idea sometimes to do those multiple screeners, especially for difficult kids. Sometimes kids will respond much differently with other teachers. So I don't think you have to do that with a lot of them, but the answer is no. It does not pull them all together. It will show you multiple scores.
Okay. In regards to the BESS, is it recommended to have the teachers add the Universal Screener widget and the Universal Score widget to their dashboard? What are the pros or cons of this?
Well, I'll tell you mine, and I'll let Adam and Maria. But I think I've seen it 2 schools of thought where sometimes the teachers perseverate on these scores. I've had teachers go into a depression because they looked at these scores and saw them as a reflection of themselves. And if I have a community like that, I don't recommend always showing all the scores and them having access to all those scores. I think if I knew that teachers understood what these scores meant, that this is a screener, that this is about identifying need, that it's not a reflection on them, I think you show the scores. So that's my recommendation, is trying to understand the dynamic of my teachers. Adam and Maria, do you guys have any suggestions on that as well?
Yeah, I'm the same school of thought. I mean, if they want to see it to be reflective and see that this is how it came out and we're using it to really look at what's need of the student and not reflective of what their teaching practices are or how they might not be able to manage things, that's one thing. But it's also, we don't want to get in the environment where I do this and they want to use it so they can say, I told you so. See, I told you how bad all my students are. We don't want to get that environment either.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Sherry?
Okay. Under the Analysis tab, how do we get those various options like snapshots, referrals, etc.?
Great question. So this is simply permissions. So if you're a we have different user types in 360. So for this administrator has access to all these types of reports, and it's just permission. So what can happen is that, again, and I'll show you real quick, just because you're 360 users, is being able to look at so there's a tab, it's called Advanced tab, that some of the users in the district and schools have. If you don't have this Advanced tab, you're probably not a 360 coordinator, but people have it. So if you're on the call and you feel like you could access it, these Advanced tabs, when you click them, will actually showcase all the different permissions in Review 360 that you guys have control over. So when you're looking at student plans, you can determine if people should be able to create them, score them, just view them. Same with incident data. Who's going to be able to see the data, the analysis, those kinds of things. Classroom management, same way. But when you go to reports here at the end, that's what you were referring to. These are all the reports that someone can have access to, and that's going to be the snapshots that you guys get. So whoever asked that question, what I would ask is who in my district or school can actually give me permissions to see more of the analysis data in Review 360. Sherry?
Okay. Are the courses automatically a part of the system, or do I need to contact my R360 representative to add these to my platform?
Obviously, it depends on, I would say in most cases, the courses are added. There are times where some people have purchased pieces of Review 360, so it's always a case-by-case basis. But we tend to add the courses if needed because we're big believers on the professional development and strategy. So what I would recommend is to first ask your district person. If they're unsure about what can be added or what they're supposed to get, have them reach out to us, the implementation people, and let us know what you're looking for, and we'd be happy to most likely add it, provided that you've got something similar in the system. So, Jerry? Looks like we got a couple minutes.
Okay, we used the screener last year. Will the data still be there so we can see the growth?
Absolutely. Great. I love that question. And what you're going to do is, again, when you go into these screener data, as you can see here, screener A, this is September 2018. So what I might do is screener B, it might be something a little bit further down, 2019, and I hit update. And now we're going to be able to see the difference between 18 and 19. So again, looking at the BERI score of 76, it went up to 77. ERI went down to 13. IRI went up to 15. ARI went down to 9. So again, being able to really pull these particular screeners can be really valuable. I tell you another valuable thing, that if you have been using 360, one of my favorite things to do is to eliminate extraneous information. So I go over here to the filter, and what I'll do is I want to look at just the BERI for a lot of my screeners. So I just basically eliminate those types of scores. So again, I could see a clear picture of what they did in the spring, what they did last year, and so on, because I want to see that movement. So great question. Play with the dials and the filters. It can really be beneficial when you're looking at comparative data.
Doug, it's Maria.
Last
you can
question,
also export. Oh, sorry. I was going to just mention, since we were on this page, once you filter to show the information you want to see or you want to limit your view to, you can export data. So keep that in mind. Great question. I just pulled one right here. Yeah, like Maria said, this can be really helpful too, especially if you're versed in Excel.
with the sorting features and those kinds of things, that can be really helpful too. So thank you, Marie. I think that's, oh, go ahead.
Just one quick one. When you assign courses, are they assigned to the students?
No, courses are only assigned to teachers. So when I go in here, I'm going to be looking, it doesn't matter what those particular ones are. My choices are specific groups of people. These are going to be the users in 360 or specific people. I can pull up the data. So no students.
Okay, perfect. Well,
okay.
Those are all the questions that we had.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank all of our presenters for an excellent presentation and a lot of good answers. And I'd like to thank all of our participants today. And that does conclude our webinar. Thank you all.